Hey, just to let you know, I recently bought a brand new cord for my mic. The cable cord was defective. And again, sometimes stuff like that happens. I've shopped around everywhere. Nobody has, the big kahuna that I'm looking for. Had to find it online, so I've ordered the big bad daddy of the cable cords. Hopefully it'll arrive sooner rather than later here. I've been working on this cord, this defective cord, to try to make the audio sound better. But again, I'm really sorry. I just bought a brand new cord and it's defective after just a couple of weeks. I'm playing around with it, trying to get it to work. But again, I went with the best quality that I could possibly find. It's really irritating when you buy a product, which was good, but it ends up being defective. So I do apologize for that. So again, hopefully the sound will be better as I work with that. Now, I told you that the Fed was going to either end quantitative tightening. I was predicting they'd end it either at this meeting or the next meeting. And I told you if they didn't end at this meeting, I expected that the Fed was going to reduce it. They greatly reduced it, really effectively ending it. That's really what happened today. And again, it was a dovish pause. The Fed took the quantitative tightening from 25 billion down to 5 billion. So I mean, they're reducing it dramatically and showing concerns about the economy and so forth. So again, basically, they reduced it almost to the bare bones, and 5 billion a month. This is really positive. So again, I expect that they're likely going to end that at the next meeting. Additionally, I told you that we could see the Fed reduce the amount of GDP and the growth forecast, but still have it be a positive number that could cause the markets to calm down after this negative GDP out of the Atlanta Fed for the first quarter of 2025. We've had this negative number. And I told you if we get a positive number from the Fed, then the markets might be calmed down because of that, because the Fed is still forecasting positive growth. Now, again, the Fed was always wrong about recessions. This time it's going to be no different. But Powell said that in talking about the reduction from, 2.1%, I believe, down to 1.7% for the growth expected for 2025, dropping it below 2%, Powell said, yeah, we've got less growth, but it's not recessionary. Remember back in December, he told us that, again, it's clear we've avoided a recession. Remember that. Now he's saying, well, we've got lower growth, but it's not recessionary. Okay, he keeps saying this is all going to come back to haunt him because we're going to get a recession. He just happens not to believe the recession indicators. I do believe them. The Fed are a bunch of Keynesians, and that's why they're always blinded to the recessions. They're always blinded to, that's why they told us inflation was transitory for so long. It's because they're blinded, when you start believing a bunch of really what amounts to fake economics. And that's really what Keynesian economics is. It's fake. So anyways, we had some very bearish things happen today, but I still think we got a dovish pause. We had the Fed increase the inflation forecast for 2025. They increased it to 2.8%, up from 2.5%. They decreased the amount of growth from 2.1% down to 1.5%. That's a very negative thing. But yet the Fed basically into quantitative tightening just nearly did that today, and that's very bullish for the market. They reduced it from 25 billion down to the 5 billion, as I've said. But they didn't, even though they've reduced their growth forecast and they increased their inflation forecast, they didn't reduce the amount of cuts penciled in. The dot plot's still showing they're gonna do they're penciling in 2 cuts at this point. So again, another dovish pause out of the Fed. They're not removing one of the cuts or both of the cuts for 2025 while lowering their growth rate and increasing the inflation forecast. So that's another reason why the market rallied. That and the reduction of quantitative tightening, the Fed's concerned about the economy. That's going to be good. We're going to have the recession. The market's going to rally, and we're going to end up likely making new highs, in my opinion. We're getting this rally that we're being told is not going to happen, that we're going to all fall off a cliff now. And I told you, I don't believe this is the 20% crash that I've been predicting that will happen just before to usher in, to kick off the bear market that will just happen just before the recession, we start getting this 20% crash. I don't believe this is it. I believe this is the preview of coming attractions, as I've been talking about. Fed funds rate, it went from expected to be 3.9% in 2025, 3.4% in 2026. They're still keeping the 2 cuts for 2025. So, and listen to me, they're going to end up cutting a whole lot more. And the herd doesn't believe we're going to get the cuts. The Fed doesn't believe we're going to get the cuts. We're going to get the cuts because we're going to get the recession that they've. And now we're starting to see people start freaking out that we're going to move into recession. Long before when I told you that this was going to happen a couple of months ago, nobody thought that was possible, and I warned you it was going to happen. And now we're starting to see evidence of that. Fed cutting back the pace, runoff. I think that's going to help the markets to rally. I think that's going to be bullish. That the Fed is saying, hey, the economy, and they always say this, the economy is expanding at a solid pace, but yet they're reducing as they reduce their growth rate. But he's still saying that he doesn't think it's recessionary. So again, that might calm nerves about that negative quarter one of GDP. And I told you it could change. Even if we get a negative quarter, when we get the data by the end of April, the market could just end up shrugging it off. This could go on. Rally, if we bottom out here, we could get a rally that will go on several weeks, possibly several months into May or into the summer if it goes beyond April. You got a dovish pause out of the Fed. They're pausing, making another monetary policy mistake, but they are greatly reducing, essentially ending quantitative tightening by reducing it so much, which is what I've been expecting. I expected it to end or be reduced, and it was reduced, likely ended at the next meeting. But then we also got the Fed keeping the 2 cuts, so they're raising the inflation forecast and reducing the growth forecast. So I think that amounts to a dovish pause. They've given us the forecast of inflation higher and growth lower, and remove the cuts. The market probably would have freaked out. And I think this opens the door to go higher. Now, again, I think we're in a bottoming process. We had more bullish signals take place today. I'll show them to you in a moment. But I told you, again, back at the lows last week, and on Friday with the Friday rally, I told you we were going to rally back up towards the 200 period on the S&P 500. What are we doing? We're rallying up to the 200 period, as I said. Again, fell short of it a little bit over here. Pulled back yesterday. And then now, let me change that to black. And then now, we're coming up to just under that 200 period. Now, again, either we're going to pull back and test this low and form a divergence with the Osmo oscillator and the RSI, or we're going to get a higher low that sets up and plow through this level. And maybe that higher low was yesterday. That's possible if we can, get up through this 200 period moving average and head towards our 50 period moving average, which is what happens when you start getting your final blow off top. At least it did in 2000 and 2007. You dipped below the 200 period, you got back above it, and you moved up sharply towards the 50 period, paused there, and then blew past the 50 period. And it could be, as we approach April 2nd, we rally up towards the 200 or 50 period, we pull back, and then maybe these tariffs get delayed. Europe comes to the negotiating table. I think that's going to happen, and we can blow past the 50 period moving average and go back and test the highs, which again, we talked about the failed breakout back over here on February 19th. So do we get a divergence, or do we just start seeing Osmo oscillator bars go into positive territory? It can happen either way. So again, I think we're in a bottoming process that either we're going to test this low, take it out, bottom out, and then go higher, or we're going to just bottom out here and eventually get back above that 200 period moving average. But some more bullish things happening today. And we did rally. Now we still have red bars, reflecting the trend. And that happened right after we had that failed breakout back over here. And we still have a red cloud, but we closed above our 10 period moving average. The bar is still red, reflecting the trend, but we had a positive day. We closed above the 10 period moving average. Over here, we got rejection at it. So again, we're coming up to that 200 period, but we didn't see the bullish reversal of conditions. We actually got it with futures, but we'll see what happens. You had the contract quarterly change, and so it's already up there at that 200 period. We're just shy of it here on the S&P cash. So again, we'll be watching. Do we get blue bars? Do we get a green cloud? Do we get above that 200 period? We'll see what happens with that. So again, do we go down, test this low? But you got people telling us right now that, you know, the bottom is about to fall out of the stock market. And again, we've had a 10%, 10.5% correction. We're likely going to rally to new highs. Then you're going to get your 20% crash. Then you're going to get your bear market. I don't believe that this is it. I think you're in a bottoming process with either a lower low coming for a divergence, or we've set up a higher low or about to set up a higher low that will eventually get us back above the 200 to validate this low as a bottom, one or the other. But I believe we're in a bottoming process, as I've said. Same is true for NASDAQ. We tried to get above that upper boundary, the cloud today. We couldn't do it. We still have red bars, still have a red cloud, but we did close above the 10-period moving average. You got to flip this back to bullish for momentum. To flip, you got to get a bullish reversal of conditions with the momentum here. Again, we had the failed breakout up here. You got the reversal of conditions, and it's been below the 10-period up until today. We closed above it. You got the green bars. Do the green bars just go positive, and we start seeing this move back to test the 200 period or try to get back above it? Or do we go down and again get another reference point of a divergence? Some indicators and form a divergence on others, like right here on the awesome oscillator. So we'll be watching to see how this unfolds. But again, I do think we're likely in a bottoming process. The question is this low going to hold here or not? And it still may be that we end up getting a divergence here on the awesome oscillator and the RSI in the daily time frame. So we'll be watching that, but you got to get more bullish signals. We did get more today. I told you we're getting all these bullish signals, bottoming signals on Bitcoin. Bitcoin's momentum already changed. S&P got the bottoming signals. Now the S&P's momentum is trying to change. I'll show you that. And again, Bitcoin, we had, you know, this double bottom, these bottoming signals surrounding the 200. Now the bars are flipping back to green here with Bitcoin in the daily time frame. That's suggesting the trend is going to change, and we're starting to see now a push above the 200 period moving average as the S&P right behind Bitcoin. Bitcoin, if Bitcoin closes above the 200 period today, and it's up 3.64% right now at the moment, if it does, then the S&P will likely follow. I told you the S&P can follow Bitcoin to the 200 for a test, and then again we consolidated around that 200 with Bitcoin. Do we see the S&P eventually get back above the 200? Do we see it immediately, or do we see it do what Bitcoin did? But again, it's still possible the S&P goes back and tests the lows Bitcoin did over here. Maybe that it just is right behind Bitcoin, and it's doing something similar to what we had in 2000 and 2001, where you dip below the 200 period on the S&P and you get right back above it. But the signals played out very nicely on Bitcoin. They're playing out right now, giving us this rally on Bitcoin off of the lows as the S&P right behind it. S&P got a similar signal here at this after the recent low there last Thursday. We had a premature signal here, but we had two signals very similar to what Bitcoin had. We had a low and then we went lower, but this one was a false signal. We tried to rally and we couldn't flip signals. This one was a good signal marking the top, and the top over here from December. Similar bottoming signals to what Bitcoin had. I keep telling you, again, the market is going to follow Bitcoin. It followed Bitcoin down to the 200. If Bitcoin clears the 200 and we start moving and seeing everything begin to turn back to bullish, which we are right now, we got the bottoming signals on Bitcoin at the first bottom over here, and now the second bottom over here. All these bottoming signals, and now the momentum line has flipped back to bullish. Tried to flip back to bearish here off the 200, turning back to bullish with the little arrow there, and now we're trying to get a green bar. So we're trying to turn this around with Bitcoin, clearing the 200 period. And if we can do it and start flipping signals, all begin to flip back to bullish with Bitcoin, the trend signals, then the S&P couldn't be too far behind. Now what we had right here is very similar to what we're getting right now on the S&P 500 here under the 200 period moving average with Bitcoin. Let me show you. Now remember, we had the bottom over here, couldn't close below the 200, but we got these bottoming signals, rallied up, the rally failed, and we had this divergence. S&P still may do that, but you have these bottoming signals that are developing on the S&P, very similar to what we had here on Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's momentum then changed, and now we're starting to see push above the 200. So I expect that we're going to see the trend signals begin to change. And again, the bar reflecting the trend is trying to change. It's not yet, we don't have the close yet for Bitcoin. So again, we have to get a close with that happening. Now look what's happening to the S&P 500. We're getting more bullish signals. I talked about the bullish signals. We had the bullish signals that are forming here on the S&P 500. We had these two bottoming signals, and the little circle there is suggesting a bottom. Bitcoin got those at its two lows. We had that show up. Getting a third and another bottoming signal, but as we're doing that, the momentum line is turning from red back to blue, and it closed that way, so that's a positive thing. Bitcoin just had that happen, and that is what caused it, or is allowing it, to try to get above that 200 period. And again, right now it's up over 3.5% at the moment. The stock market rallied. We didn't close at the highs, but you did get more bullish signals. So do we get what we got with Bitcoin? Do we rally up here to the 200, we stall out, and we go back and test the low and take this low out and get a divergence on the RSI, and maybe here with momentum and the awesome oscillator? Or do we just start seeing signals go positive and we start busting up through this level? And that's really $64,000 question, because we could go up to the 200 and pause like Bitcoin did, or we can come back and test the lows. But you're getting another bullish signal here. And today the momentum line, which is very positive, flipped back to bullish. That's a bullish signal, and it's validating these other signals that we're getting. So it could be that we go up and test that 200, and maybe we try to get through it without busting back down to new lows. So keep that in mind. Either scenario, I've talked about both of those scenarios, but I do believe a bottoming process is forming. And if we have bottomed with our low on Thursday, again, I think you're going to get a 15 to 20% rally. It's going to take the S&P to new highs. I think it's going to top, and then you're going to get your 20% crash. This is a preview of coming attractions. This is a 10.5% drop that we've had here, and maybe it goes to 12%. Again, 2007, it went down 12% before we had that final phase of the blow off top. In 2000, it was 10.40%. But more bullish signals today, and the momentum line turning back to bullish on the S&P. That's very, very positive, and increases the chance that maybe we got a bottom here. Now, what Bitcoin did is it put in a bottom, momentum line went up, we went higher, but then you still came back down and tested it. So there's still that risk, okay? But we'll see if something happens. And again, do we have something like that happen going into the tariffs for April 2nd? Or do we, rally up to the 50-period moving average and then pull back and blow on through it if maybe we get a pause or something, or negotiations or something surrounding the tariffs? Same thing for the NASDAQ. We didn't get the bullish reversal of conditions. We didn't flip the bar color here, but we did get another bullish signal here, and we did get a momentum line turning back to bullish. Turned back to bearish up here at the top, and we turned down and we saw the sell-off. Now it's flipping back to bullish. So you're getting these bullish signals down here. You're getting the circle down here. Again, still could form a divergence like Bitcoin did. A little tiny one develop on some indicators in the daily time frame, and then you had those bullish divergences develop on the 60-minute charts. But again, you're getting bullish signals here as you head over here. Now again, Bitcoin rallied up, and those bullish signals just marked a short-term bottom, and we ended up forming the larger diversions. We'll see if that happens. So those are the two scenarios I've been looking at. But again, you're getting multiple point of bullish divergences as you're now seeing momentum try to flip on both NASDAQ and the S&P with today's rally. So, Bitcoin's trend is trying to flip here. If we can get the bars flipping to green, if we can get that by the close and see it remain that way and not go back down and take out the lows, but get and hold above the 200 period moving average, and then see the line right here flip from red to blue. It's still red at this point, but if we can flip it to blue and then the background flip back to green, then again, you could see a change in trend with and I've programmed the bars to flip and the line to flip when the trend changes for Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's trend can change, well, so can the S&P 500. But we've got to see the S&P be able to flip momentum intraday and then on the daily charts, and we're starting to see the momentum line turn bullish. Can it remain that way and begin to get the S&P back above the 200 period moving average? The risk is we still come down and take out the low and end up forming a divergence on indicators. That's the risk. So we've got to flip it around. If Bitcoin can do it, then maybe the S&P isn't too far behind. Even if it goes back and tests the lows, and Bitcoin doesn't, Bitcoin, if it can close above the 200 period moving average, that would be a positive sign for the S&P 500. Here, we've got to start seeing everything flip back to green, and right now, we're getting this rally. You got to get back above that 200 period, and when you see that happen, the 200 in the daily time frame, you'll start seeing things intraday begin to flip. You'll start seeing daily signals begin to flip. Right now, again, we've seen bottoming signals on the S&P like Bitcoin got. We're now starting to see some momentum signals like the momentum line turn back to bullish. The impulse line and a couple of them are turning bullish, but you've got to be able to flip the trend signals in the daily time frame, and things got to turn back to bullish here in the intraday time frames in order to turn it around for the S&P 500. Right now, the S&P is trying to bounce off this horizontal support level. We still may go deeper into it. We're just above it here. We still may go deeper into it, but we've dropped 10.5%. Again, we're in a bottoming process, and I think it's going to play out one of two ways. That is that either we've bottomed, and here's the 60-minute chart of the S&P. Either we've bottomed here, and we have this ABC move, A, B, and C, and it's completed now, and we're starting this next push higher, completing our wave 4 there. We're moving into now wave 5, and we're going to get a 5-leg push higher that's going to move above the February peak. I think that's likely going to be the case. But it still may be this move isn't done, because it's possible, it is possible that we have a 1, 2, and this whole thing is 3, and then we get 4 here, and then we come down and get 5, and then we go on our way, whichever way. And if it happens that way, it might do what Bitcoin did and form a little double bottom. We did have a little divergence, though, here. We did hit this level, and then we went lower, and we formed these bullish divergences. You got that here on the MACD, and let me just scroll down here so you can see it right there on the MACD, and we're recycling back up in the stochastic now. And you got these multiple point divergences on the RSI. So again, is the bottom in, or do we get one more push down? And again, people are saying that we're going to have this massive crash now after the 10.5% sell-off. And again, the herd's very bearish down here. They weren't bearish, extremely bearish up here. They had negativity as far as sentiment surrounding the tariffs, but they weren't full-blown bears as they have been down at these lows. And that's what usually happens. And then you get the bears telling us, that the crash is going to just keep going. And again, you're likely bottoming, and you're probably going to go make new highs. So again, coin can do it. The S&P and NASDAQ are likely not that far behind. And again, we have that bull flag on Bitcoin going into the trend line from 2023 and trying to bounce off the 50-week. Right now, you're trying to get this traction off the 50-week moving average surrounding the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 as well. The NASDAQ's trying to bound after breaching the 2022 trend line. So very similar situation to what we have with Bitcoin. So again, I think one of these scenarios is likely. Then I think you're going to go make new highs. But again, I think you have an ABC structure here. I think this is corrective. I don't think that this is the top. I think you're going to go make one final high. And that's what has happened in the past. Now, again, we could still see this push down and end up forming a divergence on the histogram and the oscillator and the RSI. Still, maybe we get one more push down. We'll be watching as we move closer towards the tariffs. That's certainly possible. But if you can get back above the 200 period, then we're likely on our way to that 50 period moving average and the cloud here. So again, we'll see which way it plays out. But again, we have the possibility of a divergence on the histogram or in the awesome oscillator and the RSI. But if we tag the 200, as I've been warning you, again, we're still shy of it, but we've moved up towards it. Again, you still may go and get something like this, like what Bitcoin did. It went up here to the RSI, to the 50 level, and then it came back down, and you ended up getting a divergence like that. We had this little tiny divergence right here, mark this bottom. So maybe that's all she wrote. But like I said, you got to get back above that 200 for all of this selling to end. I'm looking for a bottoming process. I think one of these two scenarios is the more likely scenario than a crash and that we're going to get end up getting a 20% drop right now. I don't think that's going to happen. Could the bottoming process happen as we go into April or ahead of April? Could we get back above that 200? Keep your eye on Bitcoin because, again, the market will eventually follow Bitcoin. If it can clear the 200 as it's doing right now, that's going to be a positive sign for the stock market that the S&P will likely get and NASDAQ will likely get back above their 200 period moving averages. Now, when we drop below the 200 here, we came down and now we're rallying back up towards it. Well, again, we had two different scenarios play out in 2000 and 2007. And I'll show you that. But again, in both of those cases, when we bottomed, we went, 15% higher and then 17% higher. I think you go 17 to 20% higher. And again, up into the next several weeks or maybe several months. It happened rather quickly with the topping process in 2000 and 2007, as I've talked about. I think we're eventually on our way back up to the trend lines that I've talked about. And again, the daily time frame, the weekly time frame. And again, I think that we've got a wave 4 here, and either it has completed here, we're going to get one more push down to complete it. But I think you've got an ABC structure in an expanded flat. An expanded flat, you go slightly higher than this high, which we did, and then you go beyond this low, and it's a 335 pattern, which is what we have right now or about to complete right now. So again, I think we're in a bottoming process. Same thing with NASDAQ. You got the bullish divergences going on here. We need to be able to get back above those 200 periods on the daily if we're going to continue the risk as NASDAQ gets another push lower. Same exact scenario for NASDAQ. 2-minute chart here. Point out that on Bitcoin's 4-hour chart, which is almost equivalent to the S&P, you're breaking out of a bull flag. We had a triangle and it evolved into a bull flag, and you're breaking out of that. So again, are we on our way to the trend line? Are we on our way to the resistance zone? And if we are, then the market could soon follow Bitcoin, but it might also have a delayed, Bitcoin had the low here and then the test of it, you still might get that with the S&P. So again, but Bitcoin, I think, has completed a bottoming process, and the S&P seems to be following it with the bullish signals, bottoming signals that we got. Now momentum, the momentum line trying to turn bullish. We'll see if the S&P can bottom or not. Or does it do what Bitcoin did? But again, positive sign with the bullish, the bull flag breaking out here on Bitcoin. It's up over 3.5% at the moment. The bull flag bouncing off the trend line. So this is also positive for the S&P 500. Can the S&P get back above the 200? Bitcoin's bouncing off the 50-week moving average. So is the S&P. Trying to anyways. Nvidia's been rallying, but it's about to get a bearish death cross, so that could be problematic going forward. We'll be watching Nvidia. I believe Nvidia's peaked, and that could be problematic for the NASDAQ going forward. But again, sometimes they diverge like they did back in July. NASDAQ made a new high, and Nvidia did not. Do we see something like that? You got a possible bull flag like Bitcoin here, but it could also be a bearish channel. We'll be watching as we are likely going to get the death cross here in the next day or two, probably tomorrow. NASDAQ up close one more time. Again, we broke the trend line above the 50. We'll see again, can we? And we've rallied up to fill the gap up here. Can the momentum continue? Do we have a higher low and now we get a higher high, or do we go back and test this gap low down here, test this gap low down here and try to take it out and take out the low? We'll be watching to see how it unfolds. Do we get a post-Fed rally or a post-Fed sell-off? S&P came up, filled Tuesday's gap, and then it has pulled down off of the highs right there. But we do have the 50 back above the 200 here in the 5-minute time frame. So we'll be watching, can the rally continue? Will the bottom hold for the higher low that we have, at least so far, from last Thursday's low when we bottomed, not seen on this chart. You see it right here on the 30-minute chart. Again, the higher low, the gap lower, came back, filled the gap. Now we're stalling at that trend line. Talked to you about that trend line earlier in the week. You see it on the 60-minute chart. So again, do we stall at this trend line? We got a little topping tail there on the 60-minute chart. Do we pull back? And if we do, if we pull back, do we see this low right here and the low here hold? That's the support zone now. Or do we try to clear this level? Or again, if we come back and fill this gap, do we take this level out and go slightly lower and get a final fifth wave in our 5-leg push lower? Or did it complete right here? And again, you've got the bullish divergence. We'll see what happens. But we rallied up to the trend line I've been talking about. We fell short of it here previously. We're now there, and again, just under that 200 period moving average in the daily time frame. Now, when we had dropped below the 200 in 2007, we dropped below it Actually, we did over here, and then we did it again, and we went lower. But then we got back above it, pulled back, danced around it, eventually went and tested the 50 and blew past that, went to a new all-time high. And we did that in about 9 weeks. We went 15% higher. I think you're going to see the same thing. That's why I'm saying we're going to go 15 to 20% higher. I think it's going to be closer to 17% to 20%. In 2001, it was 17% in less than a month. But I think you're in an overall topping process. This is why I think this is the preview of coming attractions. I don't think that this is this yet. I don't think that this is the 20% sell-off where we get the Fed panicking yet. I don't think we have that yet. We can't make new highs like we did over here, stalling around the 50 period, then you got problems. Over here, we stalled at it and then got above it, which is what I think is going to happen. I think you get that final blow-off top climax rally. And this is the preview of coming attractions. This is the 2007 top daily chart. This is the 2000 top right here. Again, you had nearly a 10.5% drop. We just had a 10.5% drop. But then you rallied, and look at right here. You rallied above that 200, okay? And you got above it, and again, danced around it a little bit, stalling at the 50, very similar to 2007. Now here, we stalled a little bit under it, got above it, stalled a little bit again at the 50, and pulled back, but then we had this push on through. Do we see something like that? Hey, if the tariffs are announced that they're going to be paused and Europe's going to come to the negotiating table, guess what? We're going to get a massive rally. So do we see something like that happen? I'm making the video. Bitcoin's up even more. Bitcoin's up almost 4% right now. And if it can close strong above that 200 period, the S&P might be not too far behind it. Here you had a rally of 17% in less than a month. I think you're going to see something like this where you go back up above the highs. But then again, it's going to be followed by a pretty ugly sell-off. Now here we went sideways for a little while and tested the high and then got the sell-off after that. And I cut it off here. You can't see it, but we sold off 20% after the September 1st high. But I think you're doing what we did over here. You get below the 200, you get back above it, you still at the 50, and then I think you clear that area, and I think you're going to get your final climax rally to complete the final phase of the blow-off top.